The average retiree, 65 or older, relies on Social Security as their primary source of income. Out of those, 50% of that majority rely on Social Security as 90% or more of their income. They are living paycheck to paycheck, still drowning in debt, barely eking out a living, possibly becoming dependent on their loved ones. This is what normal looks like. We are the most in debt, over-medicated, obese, overfed, under-saving culture that ever existed on this planet. That's what normal looks like. We have to dare to be different. We have to be willing to say, you know what? The crowd feels comfortable, but the crowd is not safe.
Hey there, wonderful listeners of the Fortunes of the Brave podcast. Mary Katherine Johnson coming back again, CXO of Planet Wealth. Thank you for joining us and putting us in your ears or in your car stereo speakers or wherever it is you're listening to us. But today, because today we have Chad Hufford with us, who is the founder and financial planner at Veritas Wealth Management. Chad, how you doing today?
Mary, I'm doing great and appreciate the opportunity to be here and offer some encouragement and empowerment to your audience and ultimately just help them create a life of more abundance.
Abundance versus scarcity every day is what most of us strive for, right? I don't know. Scarcity has been leading our lives every day. And we have to really make a choice of abundance, don't we?
We do. And I think that we are wired for scarcity. We are wired to survive, not thrive. I mean, you think about where we came from, a couple thousand years ago, or maybe a little bit longer, 4 or 5,000 years ago, people weren't worried about planning for the future. They were just trying to survive the moment. And like, if I fall asleep in this tree, is something going to eat me today,
Right.
So we're not wired to think about, what are the decisions I'm making today? How are they serving me 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road? But I also think when it comes to abundance, a lot of us don't measure abundance appropriately. We think of abundance in material things that we see others valuing rather than what is truly meaningful in my life or in the lives of the people that I care about. And so I just view wealth, I view investments as a tool to build a more abundant life. A part of that, Mary, is for people getting clear about what they actually want out of life. And too many of us are out there clawing and scraping to achieve what somebody else seems to value. And it's like dancing to somebody else's music, and then we wonder why we're tripping over our own feet.
Duh. Yeah. Well, but that also brings us back to another basic human instinct, which is belonging to the crowd. Because that's another thing that made us very afraid. If we were out by ourselves and we weren't in the herd, we could easily be eaten. We could easily have any number of difficulties befall us and die from them. So you're talking about two basic instincts, overcoming them because we've pretty much solved those problems in most of the Western world anyway. So it sounds like, this is not a normal financial planning kind of conversation, right? We're talking about much more of a coaching and holistic approach. Sounds like that's kind of who you are and what you do.
It is, because we're not out there trying to reinvent the wheel, Mary. The tools are out there to build wealth, and they've been out there for a long time. The problem isn't that people don't have access to the tools. The problem is they don't use them correctly or consistently. And I think about it like, somebody working on their health journey, buying a gym membership doesn't get you into shape. Having a treadmill that you hang your clothes on isn't going to help you lose weight or lower your blood pressure or anything like that. Having access to the tool is not the same as having a plan and executing that plan. So our mindset is to really coach and empower investors to build a life of true freedom and abundance, make sure they don't run out of money or purpose in retirement, but making sure that they continue to execute that plan. I've met hundreds of people over the last 20 years who had phenomenal financial plans that weren't working, not because the plan wasn't correct, but because it wasn't being executed the right way. So our job is not just to come up with a plan, help people find and identify better investments, but to execute and utilize those plans the way that they were intended and to pivot and adapt as necessary. It is very much a coaching relationship. We're really managing investors more than we are managing investments.
Ah, yes. So managing the person rather than just the process.
Yeah, and I was listening to a recent episode of yours, and one of the things that somebody mentioned, I'm going to paraphrase, but essentially is we can't solve money issues with more money. If people are not managing the wealth that they have right now appropriately, giving them more of that wealth is like giving a teenage driver more horsepower. Like if you can't manage a minivan, you have no business driving a Porsche. So
That's right.
giving a young, and I have young drivers. I have a 17-year-old that has I think 2 accidents the last 6 months. It's been fun, but giving her a faster car does not make her safer. In fact,
No.
is going to probably just allow her to get into more trouble. And I
Yeah.
think by trying to focus primarily on the money side of the equation, we miss the investor, we miss the behavior side, which is arguably even more important. So, I mean, look at all these professional athletes that you see that have made hundreds of millions of dollars in their career and end up bankrupt or end up in so much trouble because they've never been given the psychological tools, the emotional tools to deal with the wealth that they have. And we keep giving them more and more wealth, and it actually destroys them. And anyways, I could go on and on about that, but it's helping people to really have a better relationship, not just with money, but with their future selves.
Definitely. All right. So it sounds like you agree with me that really change starts with a mindset shift.
It has to, because
Yes.
uh, you bring you into the future.
That's
And
right.
and so oftentimes we try to change our circumstances, change our environment, rather than looking at changing ourselves first so we can make the most of the environment we're already in. And like you said, mindset, it's seeing things maybe in a different way, seeing things with a fresh perspective. And the other thing I would say around that, Mary, is it's really hard to act right if you're not thinking right. And building wealth, I don't, some of your audience probably would love to find a get rich quick scheme. That's not what I'm about. It's about building wealth sustainably and slowly that can be maintained indefinitely. That's what's important. So this is a marathon. It's not about fake it till you make it. It's not about, hey, what can you do over the next 5 days or 5 months? It's what can you do over the next maybe 5 decades? And in order to have that kind of persistence and patience, you have to have the right mindset. So it starts with the 8 inches between people's ears, and then it flows out from there.
Yeah, because you said that who you are now, you're bringing who you are now into the future, but who you will be in the future will be different because of the experiences you have between now and then. So, I had an interesting conversation with someone before that was talking about this very thing. And he was talking about the fact that if we just ask ourselves some of those standard questions, like, what about my family? Who in my family or my community do I want to help in 5 decades, in 4 decades? Who do I want to help? And then, all right, so how much is that going to take to help them in that way? And we don't have to always wait till 5 decades. We could start at 3 decades or two, just 20 years and say, okay, who am I going to want to help? And how much is that going to take? And then how am I going to get that? So it's kind of reverse engineering, right? So how do you help people turn the confusion about their futures and about building wealth into more of a confidence from a mindset perspective? How do you help them become, or at least see, the person they're going to have to be in that future to be able to reap those rewards?
Well, the first step is clarity. And it starts with what you just said, is coming up with more clear objectives, because I want as much wealth as possible, or I want to make as much money as I can. That's not a real goal. Goals have to be specific. They have to be measurable. They have to be meaningful. And I like what you said about, who out there can I help? who out there do I want to be able to help? And in order to help that person, how much stronger do I need to be? And I'll try to make this short and quick, but some of your audience will remember Ray Lewis, one of the best linebackers in NFL history, played for the Baltimore Ravens. He was at University of Miami in college, very highly recruited, but nobody expected him to be as good as he was in the NFL. And he shares a story about his upbringing. He had a terrible upbringing. His mom was in and out of bad relationships. His dad left very early, and he witnessed his mom beaten and abused often and time again. And he one day decided that I am not going to stand for this anymore, but I'm not strong enough to help my mom. And he went into the garage and he took a deck of cards. And he flipped over the deck of cards, and it was a 2. So he does 2 push-ups. Flips it over again, it's a 7. Does 7 push-ups. Flips it over again, it's a 9. Went through the entire deck, and he started doing that every single day. And then he started adding pull-ups and sit-ups to it. And what we saw in the NFL was this physical monster of a man. And where it started, though, wasn't because of football. It's because he wanted to be strong enough to protect the woman that he loved, so he wouldn't see her hurting again. And I think that for all of us, if we can find a cause empowering enough that we are willing to do the hard work, the sacrifice, to be strong enough to help people in our lives, to make a difference and an impact, you have to have a goal more compelling than, I want to have enough money so I can quit my job.
Right.
Now, that might be a part of it. But what is life going to look like for you if you no longer have to go to work, if you no longer have to produce a paycheck? One of your recent guests talked about the idea of a job optional lifestyle. Not that you're quitting. And I think that when people get to a place of financial independence where they no longer need to collect a paycheck, that's when the years of biggest impact are possible, because you don't have to go to your 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or 9 to 9, wherever the job is. And you can pursue what you are most passionate about. And it doesn't have to have a monetary benefit behind it, because those needs are already taken care of. So that got a little long-winded, but I want to raise the stakes on what financial independence really is, because it takes a lot of work and sacrifice to get there. The more meaningful and tangible those goals are, the more we're going to be willing to fight for them. But at some point, we have to step back from the philosophical and attach some numbers to this. So for the average person, what we try to do is get a dollar-specific, date-specific goal. So we talk about some of the intangibles. What do you want life to look like? Who do you want to be helping? Who's going to be with you 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? Like, what do you want your house to feel like when you step in the door the first day that you no longer need a paycheck? But it really comes down to, Mary, how much income do you need showing up in your bank account? Don't worry about the source. But if you were to stop working next month, how much income do you need showing up in your bank account to live comfortably? This isn't to survive. This isn't, hey, we're foraging in the woods for berries and nuts and things like that. Yeah. This is doing the things that make your life fulfilling and meaningful, living life on your terms. Maybe you can't do everything you want to do, but you can pretty much do anything you want to do. So there's going to be a number attached to that. And people are going to miss it the first time around. That's fine. You're coming up with at least an estimate, because it does 2 things. Number one, it pulls us out of the present, gets us focused on the future. And it could be as simple as, hey, I'm 44 years old right now. In 10 years, I would like to have $10,000 a month showing up after taxes. That would give me the freedom to live life on my terms and never need a paycheck ever again. Now I've got a date-specific, dollar-specific goal. Now that goal might change and evolve as we go forward. That's fine. But I have something specific. I can measure that. And now I can reverse engineer that with a date-specific, dollar-specific goal. 10 years from now and $10,000 a month. We can create a pretty precise and specific financial target for the amount of invested assets I will need to produce that income and have that income continue to increase with inflation. Because that's the thing, is $10,000 in 10 years isn't going to buy what it does today.
No, no.
So we've got to make sure, and this is what my team helps people do, is adjust that for inflation, but then reverse engineer that back into the moment. So we come up with a target, the amount of invested capital somebody needs. Maybe it's $3 million. I'm just pulling that number off of a bus.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if I say $3 million in 10 years, that might be really overwhelming. Also, Mary, that doesn't sound like Chad's problem today. That sounds like Chad's problem in 10 years.
And that's right.
And so often we treat our future selves almost like a stranger. It's like another person. But if I have that goal, that $3 million, whatever the number is, based off of my date specific, dollar specific income goal, if I reverse engineer that into today, I can come up with, again, a very, very accurate number for the amount of money I need to add to my investments, whether it's real estate, whether it's a 401k, whatever. But the rate at which I need to add to those investments to achieve that number in 10 years. And it does two things. Number one, it breaks down that big goal into monthly bite-sized chunks. Because I'm not worried about $3 million anymore. Maybe I'm worried about I need to add $5,000 of capital towards that goal every month, which still might be a challenge, but I can wrap my head around it a lot more than $3 million or 5 or 10 or whatever the number ends up being. $5,000 a month also means every day matters, because if I'm trying to save $5,000 a month, that's like what, a little less than a couple $100 a day.
Yeah.
So now that latte or going out to lunch every day, like all those decisions matter. If I'm only worried about $3 million 10 years from now, it's really easy to kind of undermine the importance of the day. But if I'm trying to hit a monthly target, every single day matters. And I guess the third powerful aspect of this is not just the clarity that now I've got a blueprint, I've got a pathway, I've got daily, weekly, monthly goals to hit on the way to this long-term financial independence, but also I can celebrate some victories along the way. I might not have achieved financial independence yet, but I've done the things this month that I need to stay on track, and I can celebrate those wins. And I think that is really important from a psychological standpoint, to know that we're on track and we're doing that. We haven't achieved yet, but I have the right inputs to align my current behavior with my future goals. How does that sound?
Absolutely. So Chad, I mean, it gave me goosebumps when you talked about the athletic story, because it outlined, without the specific pathway, the specific steps that young man needed to take. He just needed to act, and he looked at what was in front of him and what he could do right now. He had to channel that emotion, that energy that he was feeling. And we can do the same thing with finances, with building wealth. And especially when you attach, again, that young man had a huge reason, a very, very personal reason attached very strongly to an emotion. We can do the same thing. But when we look at this, and if we, just like gaining wealth, or just like gaining health, and getting more fit or getting more healthy or whatever those things are, it's going to be hard work. No matter what we do, it's not going to come quick and easy. Like you said, there is no quick get rich quick scheme. That's not what we're here to do. Every get rich quick story has a huge amount of discipline and time behind it before we actually look at it and think it was a get rich quick. It wasn't. There's always a discipline and a pathway, a time-based and goal-based pathway, just like you outlined. So how that mindset and that discipline, repetition, resilience, all those things, how can you help people tap into that? Do you have a questionnaire asking people about their personal reasons for finance, or do you understand this through building a relationship with your clients?
Yeah, it's highly relational. So, and I would tell people this anytime they're sitting down in front of a financial planner. The first meeting should be talking very little about solutions and tactics and tools. they should be focused on what is meaningful to you, because everybody has different goals. Financial freedom means different things to different people. So the first time we sit down with somebody, our first conversation is almost all about what is important to you, what matters in your life, what are your hopes and dreams, and what are you afraid of? What are you hoping will happen over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? What are the things that you're afraid of that might get in the way of those hopes and dreams coming to fruition? Because until we find out what matters to somebody, it's really not just difficult, but nigh impossible to create a good plan. It's like trying to design a blueprint when we don't know what we're trying to build.
Yeah.
If we
don't
don't
even
have
know what it looks like. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if you're trying to build a mansion or a bird box, I don't know if you want a ranch style home or if you want a cottage looking thing. I don't know. So how can I start trying to diagnose until I've learned? So I think, if you look in the sense of medicine, if we are to prescribe before diagnosing, that is malpractice. Like if you walked into your doctor's office, Mary, and she's like, okay, I appreciate you coming in, Mary. Here's the 3 drugs that we prescribe the most. They're really popular. And here's a couple surgeries that we're going to schedule you for. They're also extremely popular. Everybody's doing these things. And they start scheduling all this stuff. You're like, whoa, wait, I'm here for a sinus infection and you're scheduling foot surgery. Like, what are you talking? You haven't even listened to what I'm dealing with yet. And that sounds so ridiculous, but yet in the financial industry, it happens all the time. People step into somebody's office, whether it could be a real estate broker, it could be a financial planner, it could be investment manager, but the industry is so product focused, and we're coming to people sometimes with very good intentions and talking about, here's all the solutions and tools we have, but we haven't found out what somebody is actually trying to build. So people have to have a blueprint. They have to have something that is guiding their saving and spending and investing decisions based off of their own long-term objectives. It's like, if you sat down with a builder to build a home, you wouldn't start with a blueprint. You would start with, how big do you want this home? How many bedrooms? Like, what are the basic fundamental aspects of the financial house that you're trying to create? And then you have some sort of architectural rendering that says, okay, based on what you've said, here's a picture of what this house could look like. Is this fitting the image that you have in your mind? So we go kind of back and forth until we can find some sort of agreement. Yes, that looks like what I want our financial house to be. Then we can create a blueprint. And that blueprint, it sets up guardrails. It helps people determine, are my decisions aligned with what I'm trying to build? It gives people agency. You said that about, Ray Lewis. Again, he was in a situation where he felt very helpless to protect his mom. Flipping over that card gave him a sense of agency. Right now, I've got to do 9 push-ups. Right now, I've got to do 5 push-ups. And every time he flipped that card, there was a new task. But that task was about his inputs. It was aligning his inputs with a long-term objective. It gave him freedom to pursue that objective, but focus on what he could control rather than all the elements of that situation that were outside of his control. And when it comes to finance, Mary, we both know there's a ton of things that are outside of our control. We can't determine capital gains rates. We can't control the inflation rate. We can't control federal funding rates, any of those things. We can't control who's fighting whom in the Middle East right now. Do all those things matter? Absolutely. But can we control them? No. Do we ignore them? No. But we need to make sure that we place the appropriate amount of emphasis. What happens in your house is always going to be more important to your life than what happens in the White House. And investors forget about that. And my industry is really, really bad and at fault for getting people to focus on all the things that they can't control. What ends up happening is people miss what they can control. But if you give somebody a blueprint that shows, here's what you're building today to get to where you want to be in the future, it's incredibly empowering. It gives clarity, it gives agency, and allows people to take a big plan and break it down into bite-sized chunks.
Absolutely.
Did
Thank you
that,
for that.
did
Yeah.
that
So
answer your question?
yeah, yeah. This is a conversation. I am so on board with everything you're saying. So Chad, because this is the next piece. So we talked about mindset, we talked about blueprints. Now we have a tool that we didn't have 30 years ago, and that is technology. So now, how do you use technology and education, right, to bridge that? We talked about emotional responses to wealth building. We talked about emotional, actually delaying some of those emotional, some of that gratification to be able to build wealth. But how do you take technology and education to bridge that emotional and educational gap when people are trying to build this wealth?
Well, there's a couple ways where technology can be really valuable. Number one is we can model some really cool scenarios. And because this is a moving target, right? So Mary, if you stepped into our office today, or if you connected with us and virtually, and we started going through your long-term goals and things like that, we're going to attach some numbers to those goals. But at first pass, this is just a rough draft. Sometimes those numbers aren't going to be completely accurate. As we revise and revisit, those numbers get more and more accurate. What that means is your financial plan, your financial blueprint is a living document. General Eisenhower said, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. No financial plan survives first contact with reality.
Yeah.
It's a constant revision process. And I'll just give you a real quick metaphor, kind of back to this idea of blueprints. 7 or 8 years ago, my wife really wanted to build a house. And I was just saying, hey, it's a much better value to buy something that's already out there, and we can remodel it if we need to. And so I wanted to buy, she wanted to build, so we compromised. We did it her way. And the reason,
Good job. Good job.
happy wife,
Good
happy
husband.
life.
That's
Yes,
right.
we actually
That's
just
right.
celebrated our 20th anniversary last week. So,
Congratulations.
thank you. But the way that she got me to commit to building was she met with a builder who had built custom homes for a couple of our friends. They had phenomenal experiences, which you don't often hear from the builder. Thankfully, this was pre-2020, pre-COVID. But she met with him, and he listened to her. He listened to what she wanted, what she needed. And he's like, hey, there's a house I just built that the owners have not moved in yet. I think it checks a lot of your boxes. Let's go look at it. So they went and looked at it. And she calls me, says, you have to see this house, Chad. It is everything we wanted. The floors, the cabinets, the counters, all we need to do is add a basement and a homeschool room on the main floor. That's all we need to do. Everything else stays the same. And so we don't have to make all these decisions. And so we go look at the house. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And I'm like, this is going to be easy. This is wonderful. Mary, the only thing that survived the building process was the flooring. Everything else got changed. In fact, some of the crew that was working on that home that we saw and was working on our home didn't even realize that the plan started in the same place. They didn't even recognize it. So much had changed. And sometimes that's how a financial plan works too. You come up with an idea like, this is wonderful, we love it. But as you start building, everything changes. You end up changing the countertops, you change the flooring, you change the paint, you change this. A week before we submitted our plans to the city, both my wife and her twin sister clipped our garage in our previous home with our SUV, like 3 or 4 days apart. So I told our builder, I was like, hey, in this new house, can we widen the tandem bay on one part of the garage, because I don't want this happening in the new house. And, it's like, even at the 11th hour, we were still changing things. Sorry, that's getting long-winded. But the point being, we always had a plan. Even though the plan was changing, we always had a blueprint that we were following, but the blueprint was continually being revised based on our long-term goals. And that is what is so important. about having that structure. It kept us reined in. But this is where technology is so important because we can make changes to things so easily. Whereas before you're having to redo all these calculations, like, okay, every little change, every minor detail, you were completely recalculating everything. Now it's button clicks. Oh, you want to retire 2 years sooner. Okay, click. Here's what it's going to take. Oh, you want to have a winter home down in Texas. Okay, click. We'll add that in, and the plan gets so it's so much easier now to adapt. Now, here's another thing. You talked about the emotions, right? And it's completely impossible to be unemotional about finances, but with a technological medium that is modeling our long-term plans, it allows us to take a step back emotionally. And it allows our rational brain to kind of catch back up. While we're planning this out, it's a very analytical process, and it gives our emotions a little bit of a break. So when you experience a economic storm and you're looking at your investments, you're like, oh my gosh, my 401k looks like a 201k. This is terrible, and all these different things. And okay, but we look at our plan. Our plan's still in place. Our plan still works. This doesn't maybe even derail our plan. And in fact, we might be buying the best companies in the world on sale. Maybe it actually helps our plan. But if we're looking at our investments, we're looking at the tools, we can't see that. When we look at the blueprint, we use technology to bring our future into the moment. It allows us to stay cool, calm, and collected, and to stay on track.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. It really sounds like, so Planet Wealth, our whole philosophy and the way we approach what we do, one of the reasons we have the name Planet Wealth is because we consider ourselves a world apart from Wall Street. When we're trying to help people access capital, we are a world apart from Wall Street and all the things it represents, the elites and the Harvard degrees and the backroom deals and all those things. It sounds like Veritas is a world apart from financial planners and all the things that they sometimes represent, because it sounds like we are very much aligned in our missions where people, not just products, come first.
So a couple things on that. So people, absolutely, and we talked about the importance of relationships, right? Because when you are trying to get somebody to weather a financial storm, whether it's maybe a more global event like a recession or something like that, or it's personal in their life. They just lost their spouse, or their parents passed away, or their child has cancer. There's no charts, technology breaks down at that point. You have to be able to look in somebody's eye and say, Mary wants what's best for me and my family. In fact, Mary might be the sole person on the planet that doesn't have my last name that cares that much about my family's financial future. That doesn't come with technology or graphs and charts or numbers or data. It comes through relationship. And caring for the person first is absolutely essential. Something else you said at the very beginning of our conversation, you remember you talked about the importance of a crowd and how our desire to fit in is a primal instinct. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the environmental pressures that made that so important have been removed, at least in our society here in Western culture. But those instincts are still there. And what you said is so crucial and critical, because one of the things that we have to tell people is you must dare to be different. The crowd is not doing this the correct way. The crowd is not going there. If you follow what everybody else is doing, you have to be okay with getting the results that everybody else is getting. Let me tell you what those results are, just real quick, if I may. The average retiree, 65 or older, relies on Social Security as their primary source of income. Out of those, 50% of that majority rely on Social Security as 90% or more of their income. They are living paycheck to paycheck, still drowning in debt, barely eking out a living, possibly becoming dependent on their loved ones. This is what normal looks like. We are the most in debt, over medicated, obese, overfed, undersaving culture have ever existed on this planet. Yeah. That's what normal looks like. We have to dare to be different. We have to be willing to say, you know what? The crowd feels comfortable, but the crowd is not safe. The crowd is not where I want to be. And your listeners listening to a new way of doing things is absolutely essential to look beyond what everybody else is doing and say, this is not working. I need something that works for me, my goals, and my family.
Absolutely. Chad, thank you so much for sharing this time with me. The gold that you've been trickling through here and dropping in chunks through this conversation. I hope everyone who hears our voice, all of our listeners, takes heed to this process that you just outlined and looks at things differently. Definitely a dare to be different, dare to be brave, because it takes bravery to go against the crowd, to step outside of that, because of that instinct being so strong in us. It really does take bravery, and it takes an idea that maybe I don't just have to follow, maybe I can lead a little bit, and just being brave to do that. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. All of your links will be included in our show notes. So everybody listening to our voice, please check that out if you want to hear more about what Chad and Veritas does. Any last piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yes. And it's on this idea of bravery. And a lot of times in life, we want the fear to subside before we step forward. And it doesn't take any courage if there's no fear. It is impossible to be brave in the absence of fear. And going in a new direction, going against the crowd, will always have an element of fear. And investing in the unknown. I mean, we live in an ambiguous, uncertain, ever-changing world. If you wait for the fear to subside to act, you will sit on the sidelines forever. Take courage. That doesn't mean that you don't feel fear. It means you step forward even in the face of fear to pursue the best version of your life.
Amen. That's all I can say. I can't add another thing. Thank you very much for your time. And I can't wait to get feedback from everybody listening to us as to how those last statements in our entire conversation hopefully have impacted their lives. Thanks a bunch.
My pleasure.
Did this episode help you tackle a mindset shift? Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Your feedback can provide actionable solutions to others seeking access to opportunity.